Hi, and welcome to And So Much More. We are here with part 2 of our Adolescent Mental Health series, where we are taking a bit of a closer look at what the kids are going through this I would say age group. And when I say adolescent, why don't you guys define adolescent for me? I have Dr. Bradshaw and Rebecca Hunter, and these ladies are really the experts. I'm just here to tell the story. But when we say adolescent, age group,
there's a lot of definitions about when adolescence began.
Yes.
Some of them use just biological definitions, but then there's also neurological developmental too.
Yeah.
But we typically think about middle school and high school kids as adolescents up until 18. Yeah.
And I mean, that's when it's tough, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I can remember middle school and it was tough. And my own kids are in middle school and they were so nervous about starting. So I think middle school is just this thing out there that's just a little scary for everyone, whether you've already done it or whether you haven't done it yet. No, thank you. But that's even more to say that these kids need to have direction and support and guidance. And so we did meet with some counselors from the Lynchburg City School System from Dunbar Middle School, and they were wonderful and so insightful, and they shared just kind of what they're seeing with the kids that they're interacting with on a day-to-day basis. And it was eye-opening to hear just their perspective, and obviously no names, but if you haven't watched that, go back and watch part 1 with our school counselors. So we're going to dig in now with more of a clinical perspective to the same conversation, because a lot of times students who are having a difficult time are not patients. And then there are patients, who maybe do well in school and not so much in their home life. And so it is just such a spectrum. And so first, that was a very long intro. First, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you have done and currently do with adolescents?
I'm Emily Bradshaw. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and school psychologist. I started my career as a school psychologist in a Northern Virginia school system, very large school system, where I was the threat assessment coordinator as well. Wow. Ended my graduate program with the first Columbine, our biggest school shooting. Wow. So that really tailored my experiences for the next several years, because school systems were really struggling to deal with how do we create a good threat assessment model. So that was a very sad situation to be in, but a very exciting time to be able to develop those kind of programs for that large system in Northern Virginia. Again, Absolutely. So I think that, and then now I'm working with Centra in our outpatient clinic on the child and adolescent campus located on Leesville Road here in Lynchburg.
Yes. And what about you?
I'm Rebecca Hunter. I'm a licensed professional counselor and a licensed school counselor as well. I started with Lynchburg City Schools, and I practiced at an elementary school level for about 5 years, and then made the transition over to clinical mental health. Okay. And now I supervise the inpatient units over at Virginia Baptist Hospital with Centra.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So a little bit at the elementary school level, because we did have middle school counselors, but some of them had elementary school experience as well. Do you feel like this anxiety and I don't even know what the right word for it, this balance that these kids are dealing with, do you feel like that starts at the elementary school level, or do you feel like it really just hits at middle school?
I think it starts in the elementary school level, and what happens is it's such a balance between the different domains of functioning. And so they're entering into elementary school and they're being exposed to academics and socialization. And if there's any kind of discrepancy with their speed of development or their speed of cognitive development as well, then that discrepancy starts to form their sense of self in regards to how they perform in the classroom and how they see themselves in their peer situation. And if it's not identified and addressed and targeted at that age, then it just continues to build. And that's when we see more significant distress around the middle school age, because after about 3rd grade, that's when they start reading to learn instead of learning to read. And if they have any kind of challenge in the area of cognitive functioning, then the discrepancy just really shows around that age.
Wow. Yeah. Are you seeing like similar things with the students or patients that you deal with?
Yeah, I very well said, Rebecca. I mean, really, that summed it up very well. I think another thing I just want to add too is that switch. If we have kids that are struggling, they're more likely to get in trouble. They're more likely to try to mask their challenges with reading, and they're our squirrely kids who can't sit still. They have this experience of always being in trouble, and so school becomes a place they really don't want to be. So we can see that, I'm not they start to see themselves as not a good student, and then that leads to behavioral issues later on. I also just want to say that transition to middle school is a big one, because what we're seeing happen neurologically at that time too. I mean, everybody thinks about puberty, and puberty is something, right?
Yeah.
And the hormonal changes, but we're also talking about a really giant leap in neurological growth that's happening at that time. So what we see if there's some kids have like a really mild they're making it by. They're staying under the radar. They're making it by. We used to call them our bubble kids. They would bubble up and bubble, They're making it by until they hit that block with that. The other peers are moving along faster. So we see that that's a very big challenge area. So milder struggles with like reading or executive functioning, it's exacerbated when they hit the middle school age. Social demands are changing too. No longer are they just playing on the playground, swinging together, or playing chase. Now we get a much higher rate of relational aggression among our females, as well as outright bullying. That just starts to explode around fourth grade in my experience in the school, because that's when a lot of these kids are hitting that puberty, and puberty coincides with that neurological growth, and they're learning how to play each other and manipulate each other. So.
And it's heavy. It's funny you say fourth grade. Fourth grade is when we really started to see that hit with my daughter, and it was constant, push and pull with getting to, she didn't want to go to school anymore. And, this bubbly girl who left school suddenly was like, no, I'm sick. Sorry, I can't do it. And so it's so interesting. And I love how you put it, where that if things are happening at that age group, they're just going to be expounded upon as they get older. So how can you tell? How do you know that these things are happening and okay, we need to do something about this now to stop this from becoming a larger issue?
It's going to present differently in every child. And when you say, my daughter, I'm sick.
Yes.
That's
your telltale sign. That something's going on, which is hard, because then they start finding excuses to stay home, which pushes them further behind, which makes it harder to catch up, and it increases the anxiety with going back in. So noticing when there's resistance towards going to the school day, whether that's in the morning, if they're dragging their feet, if the night before they're not wanting to set out their clothes, they're kind of fighting bed, they're already complaining about going to school in the morning, that's going to be a sign that it's causing some form of distress in one of the domains that they're focusing on, whether it's social, academic, or their sense of self. But in the classroom, it might look like fidgeting, restlessness. It might look like the goofing off, or being the class clown, or oppositional behavior. It might also look like the daydreaming, where they're just kind of taking their mind somewhere else. They've lost focus, they've lost attention. And so every child is going to be different on how they respond to it, and how it comes out in the classroom.
Now, I know when we were speaking with our counselors, they mentioned just having that open door policy, and it was, I think they are dealing with a lot of the symptoms of what we're talking about, and the overwhelming, like someone spills something on their pants, and the anxiety of having to go in front of their peers with pants from the nurse, or with wet pants, or coming in because a girl's feeling really insecure about her hair, and they're like, we're doing hair, because these things that feel like it's fine, move past it, are like enormous, just huge problems, huge humps to get over. And it's because there's all of this stuff going on beneath the surface. So what can be done? What do we do? So let's first talk to a parent. So if a parent is seeing these things in their middle school child, what would you suggest?
I think too, back to the somatic complaints, because I think that is happening at a high rate. Anxiety, and they truly do feel sick. They truly do, their stomach is upset. They're worried about getting sick in front of friends or something like that. Or, but then it gets reinforced, right? Because they're able to avoid what's scaring them, but the child might not be making that connection. So I think helping parents recognize instead, because you're trying to get out the door to work, it's pretty frustrating when your child's sick again and you've got to figure out with your boss and those sorts of things, but really just kind of diving in a little deeper, talking about this, get them to the doctor, making sure, letting the child hear that, no, there's nothing wrong with your stomach. You are okay. There's nothing wrong. This is anxiety. And then helping them talk about what's scaring them about school or what they're worried about for the day. And sometimes kids, it can be both performance issues, like I don't want to read in front of the class, or it could be social, like so-and-so, I don't have anybody to play with at lunch, or who am I going to sit with in the cafeteria, which is a big stressor for a lot of our kids. Like, who is my group and how do I assimilate into that group? So I think that exploration and helping the child recognize that, hey, this is why I'm not feeling well. It's really a stress reaction. Because I don't think many kids are intentionally starting out that way, right?
Not at all.
But it does become reinforced. They realize, hey, this gets me out of things. And then they're more likely we're going to see those complaints increase.
Gosh, that's so much. And to think that all of that is going on, because none of us want to just, shove it down and put the kids in the car and get the day going. But in the moment when you know that they are not like temperature sick, and that's the one thing I always hear from the school, they're like, there's no temperature. I have so-and-so here in the nurse's office with me. They have something's going on. I think that they're feeling a little overwhelmed. There's no temperature, so I can't send them home. Do you want to talk to them? And, that's happened a few times where just getting on the phone with them and just having a conversation can go really far. And, but I think that's difficult because I don't think every parent has the flexibility to do that. And so I think it's just really overwhelming. And I can only speak for me, but it is overwhelming when you think about what you want for your child, how you want to support them, and you see these things bubbling up, and it's feeling like you're not quite making the difference. You're not quite tipping the scales in the way you hope that you are. So where is the line between what can be managed at home and what should be brought in to more of a clinical place?
That's a good question.
Well, from my perspective, school counselors are a great support. They're there in the school system day to day, and they can come and meet your child at the door if they're anxious about coming in. When that school counselor starts to see a pattern of they're coming out of class frequently, this is more than just a bad day, and this is causing them significant distress, that's when it needs to be considered about making a connection with a community partner to see if we can get this child involved in services so that they can learn a toolkit or skill sets so that they can counter the feelings that they're experiencing. And some of our school systems around here have licensed professional counselors that will come into the school to provide counseling services. And they work together with the school counselors, which is amazing for families that have difficulty with access to services or families that can't take off from work to get their child there, or if a child is avoiding a lot of school, being able to have that intervention during the school day with the least amount of disruption to the academic importance.
That's incredible. Yeah.
I'd also like to just add, our school counselors, school psychologists, I think in the Commonwealth of Virginia right now, it's one school counselor for over 400 children.
Oh my goodness.
So when you think about, when does it cross that line that's something that the school counselor can support, but then when it does become more pervasive and it's a daily issue, they have it's one of them for over 400 children. School psychologists, it's more like one for 2,000 students. So it changes. It depends on how each county adjusts their their how many staff they have. But that's a piece. But you mentioned a toolkit, because there are really great strategies that we can teach children to manage that anxiety and that stress. And if we can do it at a younger age and start to help them kind of internalize those strategies and reduce their anxiety, hopefully we'll see less issues as they get older.
Yeah. So what is one strategy that you have used that has been successful?
In general, with the children that are experiencing anxiety?
Yeah, like if you had a child who was overwhelmed.
For anxiety, it is a lot of like mindfulness and deep breathing, large muscle relaxation. I have little strategies like a turtle, using turtle breathing, Raggedy Ann, muscle relaxation, visual imagery, and there's a lot of very specific ways, and you try to take what the kid likes and then try a method that way.
So it's going to look different for every child. Yeah.
But one thing, we're trying to calm the nervous system. So we're looking at deep breathing, muscle relaxation. We're also, really addressing any kind of catastrophizing thought process. Like, if I fail this test, I'm never getting into college, which we hear from our teenagers quite a bit. And the stress level across middle school and high school is very high.
Yes.
And when you talk about that nervous system relaxation, one of my favorite tricks is the use of cold water or an ice pack. The body heats up when we start to feel anxious. So if we can ask for an excuse to get out of the classroom, take some deep breaths as we're walking to the water fountain, take a nice sip of water, and then try to return back into the classroom, that can help to change our biological response to the emotions that we're feeling.
Yeah. Just a moment, just to be able to take a moment. And I know that, students who have like support plans in place, whether that be like an IEP or a 504, those things can be built into the day. But if a student doesn't have those resources available, I think a lot of times I wouldn't know what to do. Like, I have a student who has a plan in place, and so I feel like we have strategies, but I just can't imagine not having that partnership that we've had with the Autism and Development Center, because, I use those strategies myself. And so, I think about these kids and some of the stories that our counselors shared, and it does feel like the problem is bigger than the solution right now.
Well, I think we have some really flexible schools and with amazing teachers that problem solve, and our counselors. A lot of times you don't have to have a plan in place. You let your child's teacher know that, hey, they have a lot of test anxiety. What are your ideas? And I see a lot of collaboration. It does take time, but reaching out by email or student support team meetings, you can create an informal plan that helps your student feel supported, and then to utilize their different supports in that setting.
You know what I have started to see since my kids have been in middle school is, you get the syllabus at the beginning of the year, and typically you have to read it and then sign it, and then the parent has to sign it. But there's now this second sheet, and it's all these questions, and it's for the parent, and it's like, what do you want me to know about your child? What is something that, your child is really good at? Where do you think that your child struggles? And I'm so thankful for that.
Very nice.
And I didn't even think about it until you mentioned that, at the elementary school level, you have the same one teacher all day long. For the most part, I think you switch around a little bit more towards the end there. But, this is a lot of, these students now have many teachers, and those teachers are trying to get to know even more students. And so it is a lot. I can see why it's overwhelming. What do you think, and this is a big question, so maybe there's no answer, but what do you think is the driving force behind this rise in anxiety that we're seeing in our kids?
That is a big question.
I'm sure it's a lot.
Right, when we look at prevalence rates, since I just looked at from 2000 to now, we've seen anxiety, escalate to probably 16%, where it was at 10% in 2000. So we've seen a large increase. I do. I mean, I think that a lot of it has to do with social media, and access to electronics, because what we see happening, and I see this a lot in our clinic, when children are on the electronics a lot, and even as adults, we aren't really dealing with life. We're not learning coping strategies to, we get frustrated, we might start scrolling and try to distract ourselves, but we're not really handling situations. A lot of our children kind of dive into the video games, and they're not really trying out social, we've seen social play change dramatically.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Where now people are interacting online, if at all, and we're not seeing, when you think about 20, 30 years back when kids were out playing, there were always arguments, but you figured out ways to manage them. You figured out coping strategies and ways to interact with others, that we've really changed opportunities for learning with the introduction of all the electronics, which, think about iPads were becoming popular right around 2003, so I do think that is a piece of it. But we also have the prevalence data. We are probably getting better, maybe more accurate data now, because we have electronic medical records, and you just go in and you see how many kids have diagnosis of anxiety. And we also have more awareness, where people are more likely to seek help now. And we're normalizing mental health stress. And so there's much more willingness to come forward to get help.
Yeah. That's really a great summary. The electronics, the access, the new data, and just awareness around it. And I think one thing I would just add to that is, although we're past the COVID-19 pandemic, we are still seeing the ripple effect from it. And what I tend to notice is the children that were in elementary school at that time, that's where the foundational building blocks of their academics were really created. And when they had a gap, it has caused a little bit of a discrepancy between where they feel like they should be performing and where they actually are. And it has increased some of the isolation, the loneliness. And if you don't feel like you're doing well academically, it's hard to perform socially as well. So that has kind of compounded it with the isolation, the anxiety around illnesses and around returning to school in an illness time frame. And so it's not an easy time to be a child in school.
It is not. It is not. Something that I found so fascinating, because my kids don't have social media, but they have these like protected Gab phones where, they can only text people that we've approved them to have their numbers, and I can't read their text on my phone, but there are flagged words and phrases and things that can alert me to an issue. And so I thought, oh, this is great. This is like a safe way for my kids to have connections with their friends. So when we were talking with the school counselors, they were mentioning like the power that group chats have on the school day. And I had never considered that. And that was such a learning moment for me. And just thinking about the group, what happens in that group chat the night before, whether you are a part of it, whether you are the subject of conversation and not a part of it, and then the next day, what that does to just the whole dynamic of sitting in a classroom with these kids who now know something, and wondering, it blew my mind. And you think, just when you think you're protecting your kids and there's like something else to think about. And so I don't, you can't tell any parent to make X decision. Like everyone's going to do what they think best is what is best for their kid. But is there a recommended age for having, I know we heard things like, your 3-year-old shouldn't be sitting there with a tablet. And, but when it comes to like having a phone, even just for like texting and calling their friends, is there a recommended age where that's safe or
that's a good question.
Recommended?
That is a very good question. I don't know of any certain data, because I think we have political forces and lobbyists that are, but I would say from my clinical experience, a lot of children by the age of 7 have seen pornographic material.
Right.
The kids that I see at 7 years old, they've seen pornographic material, whether it's a pop-up ad, completely accidental, but then it's like, oh, what's this? So that is changing things dramatically. And I think that the electronics and the chats and all that, it's taken relational aggression to a whole new level. And by relational aggression, that's typically how girls bully. It's you can't be her friend, look at her hair, her shoes aren't nice, and it's those nasty things that girls do to each other that's not outward, it's so underlying and under the current, but that has taken it to a whole new level. So I think probably our girls are more at risk from that, because there's a lot of drama, and and that goes back to that neurological explosion that's happened. They're figuring out how to manipulate each other and one-up one another, and it's a power.
Scary.
So I think helping turn as far as making sure you know what's going on those chats, the app you're talking about that kind of monitors. I mean, with one of my oldest, I was reading chats and saw, and it was an interesting situation. There were probably 10 kids on this chat, and they were all talking, but there was no one was talking to each other. They were just all adding things. And as I'm looking, I see one of the children made a comment about wishing he was dead. And so then the very next day, I'm on the phone, called to the school counselor. She pulled him in, and they were able to get him help. But none of the children even noticed that he'd said it, because it's rapid fire.
So their brains haven't even wrapped around what this group chat even is.
Right.
It's just a lot of noise.
And they're not even communicating. A lot of times it's just jokes and
so
back
then
and
what
forth.
Are they learning about communication and relationship and wow.
So I would suggest, I do agree that parents need to be watching it's your phone. You bought the phone, you're paying for
it's true. I've had that conversation where, I read, and I told my kids this, I said, I am going to read your text messages at least once or twice a week. I'm not going to tell you when I'm going to do it. Yes, I get flagged messages when things are out of control, but this is how I keep you safe. This is my job as your parent. And I know parents who feel strongly the other way. I would never invade my child's privacy.
As kids get older, right? I think that's where, because there's this need for autonomy and identity development as they get older. So our adolescents, our high school kids they're going to need to start pulling away from us as parents, right?
Yes.
So that's a time where, but during those later elementary, early middle school, I think that's when you can provide them support so they can deal with that in the future. Yeah. And honestly, by high school, a lot of that has calmed, in my experience, working with kids. News. Because the children are developing and they're maturing a bit.
And I would say, while we're monitoring the content, also paying attention to the screen time,
That's a good
because the children's brains don't have a lot of opportunity to rest when they're engaged in electronics.
Okay.
And while we're protecting them out of screen time and setting limits and teaching them why those limits are important just for well-being, so that they can develop the skill set to monitor that themselves as they get into high school.
Yes.
And protecting the time right before bed as well. Because what I see is a lot of children scroll on their phone right before bed, and then they have difficulty sleeping. And if the sleep is disrupted, sleep is one of the core foundational builders that we need for mental health.
Yes. Well, and I mean, we do it. I shouldn't say we. Yeah. I do it. I'm not going to out you guys.
No, I do as well.
But, I do. I think that, and I was actually just listening to a talk, and it was talking about this content obsessed, and I don't even want to say generation, because it's just us as a society, a content obsessed society. And, as a content strategist and someone who curates content, I love it. I love getting to be a part of it, but there has to be checks and balances. But the illustration that he gave, and I thought this was really wise and also very intuitive, it just kind of makes sense. We should get there on our own maybe. But, you fill a glass with water, and after that glass is full, you can't put any more water in that glass. And so these kids are filling their minds with, content, YouTube, Netflix, messages on their phone even, whatever it is. And then, they're just on overdrive. And so then, you get to school and it's like your brain is not even in a place to receive right now. Like you're still processing the scroll from X minutes ago. And so, I wonder what it would be like to just like incorporate a little silence.
The bell-to-bell no cell is an excellent idea. I mean, I really agree with it. And maybe as parents, that's good for us too. Maybe, I don't know, 7 to whatever works for your family. No cell.
No cell phones.
Just because too, it's going to help teach children and as well as adults, because we have to put our phones down. That's the rule. We've got to put ours down too.
Absolutely.
Because we get addicted. We kind of lose ourselves in it, and just like watching TV, we aren't present in the moment when we're on our phones.
And then we don't get that time back.
Right.
Yeah, you only have so much time, and I don't even want to say just with kids, because I know there are people who are watching this who don't have kids, and you think about that time that you are really giving away, and it's so precious. So this is such great information, and I know that this feels like there's a long journey ahead of getting the right help for the right kids in place, but there are resources. And so if someone did want to reach out to get their child some resources and they did want to reach out to Centra, how would they do that?
Sure. Our child and adolescent campus, we are offering we have a certain number of slots for like sick day appointments, like if there's a mental health crisis, and as time goes on, we may be expanding that program and open up more slots for that, because we are recognizing that children get into stress. So, but for still any kind of suicide plan or self-harm, emergency room is still where you need to take your children to get an assessment for threat. But for children who maybe have a panic attack, or they had a really bad day at school and got in a lot of trouble and a lot of distress at home, that would be a great opportunity to bring them in and see one of our psychiatric providers.
Okay, wonderful. We can put some information in the description, some phone numbers, and then also the website, which just has a lot of great information on it. And so I encourage you to when you see these things, like, don't brush them aside. Lean in and reach out for some support, because there's so much support to be had. So thank you guys
Thank
so
you
much
for
for
having
joining
us.
us. Yes. And thank you all for watching, and so much more.